Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Tips to Fix Airbrushing Problems. We're going to look over PSI, grainy paint, bent needles, sticky trigger, tip dry, bubbling up, all the sort of problems you are going to come across as a beginner going into airbrushing. And all these problems you basically create yourself. So if you go through these simple guidelines I'm going to give you, you won't get these problems, you really won't, and then you can just carry on with your artwork and you can cancel out all these issues dead easy, really easy. A lot of the problems when it comes to airbrushing is a dirty brush and not looking after your brush. First and foremost, you keep your brush clean. That's where the main problems come from with airbrushing, is dirty brush. A lot of issues can be when you're a beginner. When say you're doing a multicolored piece of artwork as a beginner, you'll be getting your brush, you'll be painting with say black 1 second, then you quickly blast through, then you chuck red in it, then you do a bit of red, you blast through, put the next one in, put the next one in, and you change your colours like that without flushing through or cleaning first. So you just get a build up of each style of paint going through, and then eventually it starts to clog up and starts to cause problems, but you continue on and you continue on. Your best thing to do when it comes to colour changing is use one colour. When you finish with that colour, clean your brush. Completely clean it out so it's running clear and just keep testing it. It always seems like one mad rush when you're a beginner. It's like this journey's got to be rushed to get to the goal of this perfect picture or perfect piece of custom artwork. There's no rush. If you can sort out all these little problems first and take your time with this and keep this clean, I always say it, clean brush will give you clean work. So on this little list there's things like sticky trigger. Now we'll go over that one first because you are going to get it. The big cause of a sticky trigger is people not using airbrush hangers correctly, and they're leaving their brushes like that or tilting them back. I've said it before in other videos, you do not leave your brushes with the painting like this. That's why all airbrush hangers are designed to sit like that, so the paint flow stays to the front of the brush. The minute you start tipping this back, that paint will run down where the needle is, and there's just a packing washer, and all that packing washer does is it just guides the needle coming through. And it's sort of a seal, but not a full tight seal, because that needle's got to glide through it. Just steadies the needle near the front end as it's coming through to the front of the brush. So if you have your brush like this with thin paint in it, that paint's going to creep down, and the first place it's going to well up is where your air valve is that comes up your brush here. So you've left your brush like that overnight. You go to airbrush the next morning, pick it up, you press down, and then your trigger stays down and then slowly starts to come up. Now, the quickest way of dealing with a sticky trigger, it doesn't matter which brush you've got, take it apart. On the H&S it's one piece, so it's like the bar and the bit there. So if you've got a H&S, you'll know what I mean. If you've got like an Iwata or a Galleria, if you've got the one that's got the little sort of dangly pin that sits down, when you pull it out and you look down into your brush, you'll see where that little pin goes down. There's another little pin below it, and that's sort of the air valve. And what you're doing is when you press down on the trigger, you're sort of pushing that valve down. It sort of does that. So as you push it down, it releases the air. Your best thing to do is get a cotton bud, get some mild airbrush cleaner, poke it down the brush there on that valve, twist like that, and just clean all around that part of the brush down in there and get the paint out. Just give it a good wipe through like that, and then when you put it back together and you try your trigger, when you press down, then that will start to push back up, because you've cleared that bit of dried up paint. That's all it is paint. So First thing is keep your brushes pointing down in your hangers. Don't leave them back, don't leave them laying on the side of your table. Keep it in your hanger like that if you leave him painting it for some time. If not, just clean your brush out and then you can leave it like that or leave it laying down as long as it's clean. So that's a bit about sticky triggers. You are going to get it, I guarantee it. I've had it in the past. Sticky triggers. Now when it comes to needles, and we will all do this and I guarantee you'll do it as well. I'm just going to clean this needle while we're here. You'll dink your needle because you'll be working with the crown cap off and you bend the needle. Now the best thing to do is just buy another needle. That's the thing that I'd say now. I don't go down the route of fixing needles. I used to, but I don't now. I'll just chin it and buy a new needle. For the price of it, they're not that expensive. They're really not, needles, to get it replaced. But if you are on an absolute budget and you can't afford it at that part of time, you can straighten them out. Now, the way I've done it in the past is you'll tend to be working with the crown cap off, you'll go up to your work and you'll dink the front and it'll just put a little bend on the very point of the needle. Now the way I've got out of bent needles before is I've got 2 little cubes of Perspex, 5mm Perspex, and then put some masking tape round them, open them up like a sandwich, place your needle in and then press it in your hand. Press the needle in between the 2 solid pieces. Press, turn, and just keep pressing and turning, and that will straighten the needle out. And then what you can do is get some wet and dry sandpaper. I'd say a 1500 and then up to like a 2000. Put the needle down on the flat surface, place the sandpaper over the top and then sort of twist, spin the needle and press down on the sandpaper and then just keep spinning it and just smoothing it that dink out. And I've had needles that have been bent and got round them and they've worked absolutely fine after. But first and foremost, I would say to save going down that route of trying to straighten it and then sand it down, and just buy another needle. They're not expensive. And then it'll just, when you do come to the point where you're buying a new needle, you'll always think then, when you're going up to your artwork, you're a little bit more careful. When you come to paint, you sort of distance yourself that little bit better. So that's on sort of like bent needles, you can fix them. Now, grainy paint, when you're spraying, you're getting grainy paint. Now this can be a couple of things. It can be incorrect air pressure. So when the brush is trying to atomise the paint, there's not enough airflow there, so it's not breaking it down. So as it's coming out on your paper, it looks very grainy. So it can be air pressure, but most of the time it's your paint consistency. It's too thick. So I would first and foremost, thin your paint down. Get a good paint consistency. You're looking for semi-skimmed milk sort of mix. I'm running mine really thin at the minute. If you've been watching the channel, I'm using the isopropanol water in the FW. In the Wicked, I'm using ISO, and it just works perfect. It really does. No issues with paint flow or air pressure. I can run these brushes right down to like 7 or 8 psi with that mix, and I've no trouble. So that's the sort of mixes I'm sticking to now, is that. So it's mainly your paint, if it's grainy and it's coming out and spitting, your paint's too thick, just check your pressure. If you're trying to run your brush too low, around 10 psi with a thick paint, it's not going to happen. And you can just judge this by getting your air regulator gauge, drop it down to 10, put a standard consistency in that you're used to using, drop your pressure down, spray it, and then bring your pressure up and spray some lines next to it, and just do a little line of like 1 of 10 psi, 1 of 15, 1 of 25, 1 of 30, and you'll see the differences in that paint atomization as you bring the pressures up or take the pressures down. And that's a good way of checking your sort of paint consistency, is to do it that way. So that covers grainy paint. We've done bent needle. PSI, there's one on there about PSI settings. That would be your best thing to do to check your PSI with your paint mix. Test panel piece of paper, like I've always said when you do your artwork, stick one of them to the side and just have a little play. Put your paint in that you usually use, drop your brush down to 10, do a line, have a look at it. If it's nice and soft and atomised on the outside, you'll know the brush is good at running at 10, it's not grainy. But if it's grainy, up your pressure to 15, try it, then go up to 20, then go up to 25, and you'll see the change in the paint with the air pressure that you're using. So that covers PSI. Now, tip dry, we're all going to get it. No two ways about it, you are going to get it no matter what sort of paint. Solvent, when I've used solvent, it's a little less. Now I'm using the isopropanol mixes with the water and FW. I don't get much tip dry at all. The instant one that everybody does is pinch. You go like that to clean it. You just, any airbrushable, you'll see them all on YouTube, they'll be like doing that. It's just the first thing you do is to pinch and pull away and spray. Now, ways you can get round to not getting much build-up of tip dry is, you'll see me when I paint, I'll always sort of tend to go move to the side and give it a quick blast down of air, and then just a quick pull back, blast down of air, and then I'm always sort of checking. And then you'll see me on a piece of artwork, I'll be painting, and then I say to you as I'm painting, wow, we've got tip dry coming. Because I can see by the spray pattern, the way the spray pattern's going down. If I'm doing real tight details, if you're working a lot of details, you will notice it straight away. Especially when you're working up close, you'll be spraying. If you're doing real fine dagger strokes, you'll get it where you'll see it. It'll just start to, it'll be thicker than what you want it. It'll feel like you're pulling more back on the paint and you're getting a thicker line when you're pulling minimal back and you're right up close when you should be getting a real tight little fine line. So it's always just good to quick pinch like that, and then a quick tap on the air and pull back, tap on the air, pull back a couple of times, blast through, have a look and do that. So always sort of go to the side, tap on the air, blast through and continue on. And it'll cut your tip dry down dramatically doing that. Just double checking. So that covers tip dry. Now bubbling up, we've all had this, where you start to paint, you put your paint in. I can demo this now for you. So you've been painting, you come back to your brush and hear the bubbles? Instantly bubbling up. And you're like, oh no, what's happened? It was working a minute ago. It's this. It's always the front end when it comes to bubbling up. It's your seal between your front head assembly and the body. You just nip that up and it's gone. The minute you loosen that, you get bubbles. Instantly get coming out. It's just air going down to the front and then pushing back up and going back up the brush into the cup chamber and just pushes your paint up. So it's the seal on the front end. That's gone. That's all it is. So if you've got, whether you've got Iwata, H&S, Badger, it's that seal on that thread there when you nip that up. H&S's have got a little rubber washer that sits around the front that just gives it a little sort of snug as it closes up there. Now if you've not got that and you're on a different brush, people use beeswax and they put a little bit round the thread and then just nip it up. I've seen people use PTFE tape before just to nip it up and seal it, and that's all it is. It's just your front end, you just nip it up and that will kill the bubbling, because that's all it is. Nothing gone wrong with your brush, there's nothing, you've not broke it, don't worry, we all get it. Just make sure your front is clean when you put it back, all the threads are nice and wiped down and clean, and then when you nip it back up, you've not got to put a wrench on it and wrench it right up. You just nip it so it's finger tight. Job done, you'll have no issues. So that's all the bubbling back is, or bubbles in the cup. So spraying nice. The minute you undo that, the more you undo it, there you go. That's all it is. Tighten that back up and it's gone. So these are little troubleshooting tips that you are gonna get these. But as I've always said, if you know how to strip that down, the minute you get it, don't get eager to paint. Learn that, strip it down, put it back together. Learn how the whole thing works, how all the bits go back together and what they do, what seal goes where. If you master that first, all these little troubleshooting things, you can just pinpoint them straight away. You can be painting, something can go wrong and you go, yeah, that feels like that, something's wrong there, and you can just take it apart. Yeah, that's the problem, put it back together and your brush is working fine. That's all it is. It's not knowing this, what it does, how to break it down. So that's the first thing I'd say do when you buy a brush. Learn how to strip it, and that's why I always say to you, buy an H&S, because they are the easiest to strip down and put back together, because you can do it all by hand. You've not got little spanners to take the nozzles off with. Like if you've got an Iwata and you've got your little wrench to undo and the tiny little nozzle comes off, you drop that, it's gone. And then you've got to replace a nozzle. And them nozzles aren't cheap. At least with the H&S, you unscrew it. You can see it, you can hold it in your hand, and it just slides into the front, and then you just screw it on the front of the brush. Just makes life easier. Why have something that's difficult when you can have something that's simple that works? So they're the little tips for you. When it comes to cleaning, I always say at the end of your airbrush session, just give your brush a clean out, you know. It's well worth giving it a clean. Now I've got this SOS. It's basically like a solvent cleaner, and I'll just spray some in the cup, blast it through, blast the cleaner onto a bit of kitchen towel, wipe the brush, give it a quick boogie round in the cup like that, clean the excess paint off. This will wipe off any paint that's on your brush that's left over the body. Then put a bit of water in, then pinch and do a bubble back, blast it through like that, bubble back again, blast it through. And then if you're seeing clear water on your kitchen towel, you know your brush is clean. You know from here down to the front, that's clean. If that's blasting through clean water or clean airbrush cleaner, you know it's good. Give it a little wipe. If you want to do a little bit of maintenance, if you've got a H&S, if you've got a new Evo or the Graudez, drop a little bit of lube on that. Drop a little bit of the lube on the sides of the trigger. Job done. You've got a brush that will just keep performing. Nice and smooth. Put it back on your shelf and ready to go. So at the end of the day, guys, it's all these little problems are created by you as a painter, as a beginner. You're creating these problems as you're going along, and a lot of the time, as I say, it is a dirty brush. It's not being clean with your processes as you go along. You tend to rush, you get all the paints out, you're chucking loads of different paints because you just want to see these different colours go down and you want to get on with the artwork, and your brush is taking an absolute battering chucking loads and loads and loads of paint in it, you're leaving paint in it, it gets all clogged up, you're tipping your brush back, it's running down into the bit where the, like I say, where the trigger is. All these little problems you're creating. So if you just sort of stop, slow down and clean your brush in between colour changes, clean your brush at the end of your airbrush session, put the lubrication where I've just showed you on them bits like the backs of the triggers, you can put it near the spring, your brush will be fine, and you've got a really clean workhorse that will just keep working. So it's all down to you guys. It's that little bit of cleanliness with your brush, and you won't get these dramas. So I hope you've learnt something on this video, on these tips and tricks. Just even if you have to relate back to this video, just to jog your memory, it will then sort of all sink in place and you'll just have a lot stress-free painting, you really will, and that's what it's about. So drop your comments, tell me your thoughts, and if you are new to the channel and you're liking this style of content, click that subscribe so you don't miss out, it's free. Press the notification, then you'll get notified on more up and coming videos, and I'll see you lot in the next one. Cheers.